Hello everybody. Well, the season is nearly upon us. The 8th of March will be our first game against the Gold Coast Suns. So I'm going to have a look before the season starts, now that the pre-season is nearly over. We've still got another game against Geelong coming up on Tuesday night. But now that the season is nearly upon us, I'm going to have a look at the 12 most important players on our list. This is not necessarily the 12 best players, although there will be a little bit of crossover between those two lists. But this is the 12 most important players on our list, the players that we simply cannot afford to go down. So without further ado, we're going to have a look at that list right now. Number 12, I've got Andrew McGrath. Andrew McGrath has been the vice captain for the last couple of years. He's been a reliable defender for us. He averages 95 champion data points per game last season. He's elite for handballs, averages 23 disposals a game, and is part of the leadership group down there, and is a bit of a general in the back line. He's a pretty important player for us. Not quite in the top 10, I don't think, in terms of his importance to the team, but he is a very, very important player. I think he gets more criticism than what he deserves. I think a lot of the criticism is because he was a number 1 draft pick, and he is expected, I think, unfairly to live up to the mantle of being a number 1 draft pick when he didn't ask to get drafted at that number. That's not his fault. I've mentioned this in previous videos. I've said that if he was drafted at number 55 or 60 and he was having the career that he's having now, he would be lauded as a very good player. And I think we do acknowledge he's a good player, and I think he'll probably be appreciated a little bit more as we look back.
I mean, I guess he's okay
in 5 or 10 years' time at the career that he's had. He's played 157 games. And he's a very, very reliable player down there. There is a bit of a narrative that he has a lot of clangers. Well, he actually averages about 2 clangers per game, which sounds like a lot. You think, well, you don't want to be turning the ball over twice per game. But there are players that turn the ball over actually quite a deal more than that. Nick Martin turns it over 4 times a game. Caldwell 3.5 times a game. Merritt himself 3.5 times a game. They get the ball a bit more than McGrath, but not that much more. So he's probably a little bit more reliable than what we think. And I've got him as the 12th most important player for us in the 2025 season. If you like this channel, please consider subscribing. About 82% of the people watching this at the moment are not subscribed, and it would help me out a lot if you would just click that little button down there. It takes 1 second, and I would really, really appreciate it. At number 11, I've got Ben McKay, very important defender for us, key position defender. Got him from the Kangaroos on a lucrative deal.
We're paying him a lot of money.
Had a very, very good first half of the season. He faded a little bit towards the second half. In the second half of the season, there's a suggestion he might have been carrying a little bit of an injury or two. And he can make some occasional mistakes under pressure, but he's a very, very good player when fully fit. He averages 13 disposals a game, 5 marks, and importantly, he averages 8 intercept possessions a game. This is a full 1.5 intercept possessions more than our next best defender averages per game. And this is very, very important. With the continued absence of Zach Reid, and look, I hope Zach Reid is able to get on the park, and there's every suggestion he will. He's had a really, really good and fine pre-season. But Zach Reid hasn't been a reliable player for us over the last 3 or 4 years, so it's very, very important that McKay is able to reach the heights he did in the first half of last season. He played at all 23 games last year, so he was a reliable player, and we need him taking a key position player down there, which frees up Ridley to be more of an intercept player. McKay averages 68 champion data points per game. He's a very, very important pillar down there in defence. I got him as our 11th most important player. At number 10, I've got Darcy Parish. Boy, oh boy, do we need Darcy Parish to recapture some of the form he had from 2021.
Yeah, that's true.
He was injured last year for much of the season, played only the 12 games. He dipped below 30 disposals a game last year. For the first time in 4 years, he'd averaged more than 30 disposals a game after that. So at his best, he's a very, very good player. Back in 2021, he averaged over 7 clearances a game. To put that in perspective, last year, he averaged about 4 clearances a game. 5 clearances is pretty good. If you can get 5, you're a really, really good player. 5 or 6. He had 7 a game at his best a few years ago. So we really need for him to recapture his best form. I've said it before, Parish is one of those type of players that gets to his best form when he's had a few games under his belt. He's just that type of player. Some players are good enough to be, to come back from a long layoff and be good straight away. Parish just needs a good preparation and 3 or 4 games under his belt, and he'll be very, very good. That didn't happen last year, and yet, for all his faults last year, he still averaged 25 possessions a game and 90 champion data points. So he's got a back injury at the moment. He's probably going to be out for round 1. He hasn't officially been ruled out, but I'm pretty certain he's not going to be playing in round 1. But if he can recapture the form that he showed a couple of years ago and get over his back injury, that will be invaluable for us. He's such an important player for us. He's a little bit of a different midfielder to Merritt. He's actually more of a traditional centreman, I think, a little bit. Very, very good clearance player. And at his best, he could still be our second best midfielder. So an improved Essendon in 2025 is going to be much more likely if we have a fit and firing Darcy Parish. I've got him as our 10th most important player. At number 9, I've got Elijah Sartis. Now, this, remember, is a list of our most important players, not necessarily our best players. He is not, at the moment, at least on exposed form, one of our top 10 players, but I think he's one of our most important players this year, because if we are going to ascend up the ladder and potentially be a finals team, and maybe even better, maybe even win a final, we need some players who have not yet taken the next step to take the next step. Now, you can't necessarily expect that for everybody, but he is now in his 3rd season. He's played only a handful of games, and he's had a very, very good preseason, and he's a high draft pick, a number 5 draft pick. And a player like that, if we can turn into a genuine A-, B+ midfielder, or who knows, potentially even better, that could be the difference between us making the finals and not. We need another really, really good player to take the load off Merritt and Martin and these sort of players, potentially Parish as well, if Parish can get over his injuries. And Elijah Sartis has had a very, very good preseason. In the practice match against the Western Bulldogs, he had 31 possessions and had 21 handballs, which is really good. A lot of clearances he had out of the guts there, and that was really, really impressive. And all the signs are that he's ready to take the next step this season. And he is one of the players that we need for Essendon to improve. Essendon simply cannot improve unless we have a number of young players take the next step up this season. We've obviously lost Stringer over the preseason, haven't gained anyone of note. So we need players who are on the list, who have been there for 3 or 4 years. Elijah Sartis is one of them, to start to become really good players. He's a very, very important player for us. Imagine if we had another elite midfielder in there this year with Sartis. How much different, or how different would that make our side compared to what it's been for the last couple of years? So I've got him as our 9th most important player, a very, very important player for our fortunes this season. At number 8, I have Sam Draper. Now, I don't think Sam Draper is in our top 10 best players, but he is, I do consider, one of our most important players, especially now that we have the 2 ruck set up, and there is a suggestion that he will be spending a little bit more time forward. He is our number 1 ruckman, and therefore he is a very important player for us. He does have some flaws. His kicking is poor. It seems like his brain is working one step ahead of what his body is doing sometimes, but he does have a little bit of a bag of tricks about him. His tap ruck work is very good, and he is a very good mark. What he does need to get better at is minimising the clangers. If you have a look at our clangers last year, he averaged 3.5 clangers per game. And then you have a look at Merritt and Martin and Caldwell, who also averaged about 3.5 clangers a game. The difference is Merritt and Martin and Caldwell get between 25, 30 and 30 possessions a game. Draper has 11 disposals per game. So 3.5 of his 11 disposals are clangers.
That's really, really terrible.
So 30% of his kicks are clangers. So that is pretty bad.
It's awful, actually.
And apparently he's been working very, very hard over the off-season on his disposal, on his kicking, which is a good sign. And we will see if that is going to reap rewards this year. But given that he is our number 1 ruckman, it is very, very important that he stay on the park. He does have flaws, but he also has a number of assets and things that he can do that nobody else can do. And that's why I've got him as our 8th most important player. So at number 7, I've got Nate Caddy. Remember, this is not a list of our best players, but our most important players. The reason I've got him as one of our most important players is similar to Elijah Sartis. We need a player, especially a key forward like Nate Caddy, to begin to emerge if we're going to be taking that next step. Now, he's had a seamless pre-season, and he's helped build his tank during the pre-season, so he can play not just in the forward 50, but also might push a bit further up the ground as a result. He's pretty good overhead. He does need to work on his kicking a little bit, but he kicked 9 goals for us last year, and I think it's reasonable to expect that he can average 1.5 goals a game, maybe even pushing up to 2 goals a game. He's had an absolutely perfect pre-season, no injuries to speak of, and he's just been a very, very important player for us. He did say in an interview a couple of weeks ago that it gives me the confidence that at my best I can compete with the best. I've built on the strengths that I had last year and gotten fitter and stronger. So the thing I like about Caddy is that he seems quite a confident young man. He seems in a rush as well, which is good. I think he wants to be better sooner rather than later.
You expect too much of yourself.
And he's a big, imposing player. I think he believes that he can, compete with some of the best defenders in the competition. Might be too much to ask only his second season. I'm not expecting miracles.
Just don't expect any miracles.
Similar to Elijah Sartis, if we're going to take the leap up the ladder, we need the emergence of some young players. Now, you don't necessarily expect a key forward like Caddy to start to dominate in his second year, and I'm not necessarily expecting that, but he is one player that is brimming with confidence. He knows he's a very good player, and he believes he's going to be a very good player, and I like that about him, and that's why I think we can actually expect perhaps a bit more from him this year than what others might reasonably be expecting from a player that's still a teenager. He's still a big, burly lad. He's had a perfect pre-season, and I have got him as our 7th most important player. At number 6, we have Sam Durham. Now, Sam Durham at one point was a mid-year draft pick who really emerged kind of out of nowhere, and he's such an important player for us. He's one of those players that just loves the contest. He's full of determination. He was 2nd at the club for inside 50s and 3rd in tackles. Also came 3rd in the best and fairest. So you could argue if he's 3rd in the best and fairest, he's maybe a 3rd or 4th best player. There are a few other players in the midfield. We're reasonably deep in the midfield. So that perhaps stops him from being in the top 3 or 4, but he's still a very, very important player for us. And he just gives us that little bit of mongrel in there. One thing that Essendon hasn't really had, if you look at our team over the last, maybe even 20 years, is really sort of nasty players. And I don't think he's a nasty guy. He seems like a good guy. But he just seems like one of those guys that's sort of down in the trenches for you.
He's a tough bastard.
All right, loves the contest, loves the tackles. All right, came 3rd in tackles for the club. And he's the type of player that you sort of can't really replace. We haven't really got another player like him that just has that appetite for the contest in there. So I've got Durham as our 6th most important player. Number 5, we have Kyle Langford, the very versatile Kyle Langford.
What's wrong with my mustache?
Famously, of course, moved to full forward at the start of the 2023 season when Peter Wright injured his shoulder and hasn't looked back since then. He's kicked 51 and 43 goals in the 2 seasons since then. He's a very, very versatile player. What Brad Scott likes about him as well is his ground level skills are rated as above average. So even though we do have a lot of taller players down there, he is a very, very good ground level player. And he's also capable of playing elsewhere on the ground if need be, unlike a lot of the other players in the forward line who might not be able to play in the midfield. He's capable of playing there if we have to. But he's been a very, very good player down there. He's a very, very good kick for goal. I just wish he kicked straight on Anzac Day in that late miss. If there's one kick I could have back for the year, it would probably be that one. But he's a very, very important player for us. Mr. Reliable down there. Probably the most accurate kick, I'd say, in the team. The most reliable set shot for goal. He did falter a little bit in the second half of the season last year. He wasn't alone, kicking only 15 goals in the second half of the season. I think that might have had something to do with a knock he received in a match against the Gold Coast halfway through the year. He got a knock on the hip, if I remember, and he was never quite the same after that. I mean, a knock on the hip can really, knock you around and affect your mobility. And he's a player whose mobility is so important, the way he moves around the ground. So hopefully he can have a good run at it this year, injury-free, kick a few goals for us. I've got him as our 5th most important player. At number 4, I've got one of the most underrated players in the AFL, and that is Jai Caldwell.
I love this guy.
He had a breakout year for us last year. Very, very important player. Finished 5th in the best and fairest, had over 500 disposals, led Essendon in tackles, and I think is potentially a future captain. He's a very, very reliable player as well. He doesn't turn the ball over as much. You just know when he gets the ball, he's going to find a teammate. On the occasions he has a shot for goal, he's a pretty good kick for goal. He's just a very, very important player. Now, can we expect him to maintain what he did last year? Well, that was a breakout season last year. So that's obviously his ceiling. That's obviously what he's capable of achieving. Hopefully he can do that, maintain that. I think it's very, very important that he does. But he just showed last year that he is, I think, a very, very underrated player. Not just for us, but I think he's a player that is not really talked about amongst opposition teams and opposition supporters that much. Not a lot of people talk about Jye Caldwell. I rate him very, very highly. I see him as a potential future captain. And at only 24 years old, he's potentially still got improvement in him. So I would be expecting him to go onwards and upwards this year in 2025. I've got him as our fourth most important player. Number 3, we've got Jordan Ridley. Jordan Ridley is simply our best defender when he's fully fit and firing. It was interesting last year that when he finally came into the team for the Dreamtime match against Richmond, prior to that, Brad Scott played him in the reserves. And Jordan wasn't happy. He saw himself as being a bit above the reserves, and he sort of gave Brad Scott a bit of an incredulous look and go, "Really? You're playing me in the reserves?" And Brad Scott said, Yep, we're going to play you in the reserves. And then upon playing in the Dreamtime game, upon his return, he was the best player on the ground. He's a very, very good intercept player. Can obviously play on taller players as well, but he's just fantastic at reading the play down there. He averages 7 intercepts a game. The problem, of course, is he does tend to get injured. I think he's definitely our most important defender. He's had quad and hip injuries over the course of his career, and of course he did his a minor hamstring strain a couple of weeks ago. He should be right for round 1, it appears. But he is a fantastic player for us, and really, if we are going to make the finals, we need a fit and firing Jordan Ridley, marshalling the troops down there in the back line, reading the play. I mean, imagine if you've got Jordan Ridley down there and then you've got Ben Mackay and Zach Reid taking the 2 key positions. He is such an important player for us, and I look forward to him playing well this year. Hopefully, he doesn't suffer too many injuries. I've got him at number 3. Number 2, I've got Nick Martin. Nick Martin may very well be our second best player. I've certainly got him as our second most important player. Now, the reason I've got him as our second most important player is his ability to go forward. It's something that Darcy Parish can't really do. You wouldn't expect Sam Durham to go down there and kick goals, but Martin, who kicked 15 goals last year, about 0.6 of a goal a game, despite playing about 70% of the season coming out of halfback. Whenever he goes forward, he kicks goals. I think he's going to be playing most of this season in the forward half, which is really, really good. I think that will be good for the team. He averaged 28 disposals a game last year, 5 score involvements a game. He's just a player that makes things happen, right? Whether he's kicking goals or setting them up, 5 score involvements per game is just invaluable. He also is our only player other than Zach Merritt to average over 100 champion data points a game. He averaged 105 champion data points per game. And he came second in the best and fairest. I have him as our second most important player due to his propensity to go forward and kick goals, as well as being a player that can pick up the 25 to 30 possessions. I've got him as our second most important player and also our second best player. Nick Martin, number 2 in 2025. And at number 1, not surprisingly, Zach Merritt, the 5-time best and fairest winner, 29 years old now, but he has shown no signs of letting up. He's still very, very good. He's such a driven player, super professional, and of course he's the captain. Averages 28 disposals a game, won the best and fairest again. He's a magnificent kick on the left foot. He's the captain and the spiritual leader of the team. And we need Zach Merritt. There's not really much more else to say about this guy. He's the number 1 most important player that we have. He's our best player, and he's really our only A-grade player. You could make an argument that Nick Martin is very, very close and Jordan Ridley to being A-grade, but they're not quite there yet. We have to be honest with where we're at. Really, Zach Merritt is our only genuine A-grade player, the type of player that could conceivably win the Brownlow medal. He's really the only player we've got that could really win that award. So Merritt is our most important player. We cannot afford Zach Merritt to go down. That would be a disaster for us. And the good thing about him is he's very durable. He very, very rarely gets injured. And he's super consistent and plays well pretty much every week. So there you have it. There is the list, the top 12 most important players on our list. So leave a message in the comments. What would you have as your list of 12 most important players? Would you do it differently? I imagine there will be a little bit of conjecture and difference about where you would have certain players on the list. Is there other players that I haven't put in there? Let me know in the comments. Leave a like in the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you like this content. And as always, have a great day.